And welcome to another episode of Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host, Derek Havens. As always, joining me, of course, as always, Mr. Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Patriots' loss to the Los Angeles Rams. We're going to have a couple of different team issues to discuss, as well as previewing this game on Sunday. But before we do any of that, as always, Steve, how we doing, buddy?
I would have been doing better if they won the game, but doing great. It's a beautiful day down here in the neighborhood, so you can't ask for better than that. But all things considered, the sun still came up in the morning, and we still have another football game to watch on Sunday.
I know it's interesting. The Patriots, we have a lot to digest from that standpoint, and we'll get into that. It was a beautiful morning here too. It's been nice, cool, and crisp. It was 43 degrees when I woke up this morning in Scottsdale, Arizona. It was brisk. And just so you guys know, I mean, I like to keep it transparent on here. I like to go ahead and just kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit. I mentioned last week that I probably wouldn't be here this week. I thought I wasn't going to because my wife is 40 weeks pregnant yesterday. So I thought we were going to be at the hospital having my daughter, but it seems like she has other plans. She's going to be late just like her dad is, all the time. But I probably won't be here next week. Again, never say never because we've gotten this far. But at some point, we're going to be close enough to the edge to happen. So I might be, in and out. I wanted to go ahead again, mention it in case people were asking. I had a couple people message me on Twitter, but just so you guys know, that's kind of what's going on. Everything's all good. Baby's healthy. I'm good. We're all good. Except for the Patriots. The Patriots are not good, Steve, and I'm frustrated. Okay. So let's dive right in. I thought I want to preface what I'm about to say with this. I thought this was Drake May's best game as a pro. I thought he was terrific. I thought he had a couple of big time moments. I wouldn't say they were like in a vacuum. I wouldn't say when he's getting hit on a 3-step drop and he's hitting a shallow cross and it goes for 6 or 7 yards, you'd consider that like an elite play. But sitting in the pocket, standing tall, having the poise, it's the composure and the poise, Steve, that I see with Drake May continuously, week after week, the leadership we've seen, man, it's really exciting. Like, I don't want to be too homeristic, I'm not even sure that's a word, but I don't want to be too much of a homer here, and I do think that they deserve criticism. But I do want to give Drake May some kind of flowers kind of jumping off because I did think there was a lot of things about this game where if you're a Patriots fan, you still come away kind of like you won because you're excited about what you can see in this young man.
Absolutely. And I wrote about him this weekend because, again, I agree with you. I thought it was his best game as a pro. And at the end, I just thought that some of the decisions earlier maybe put him in a position where he didn't have to be. I just thought, I just thought that, and we'll get into it in a bit, but I just thought that the coaching staff gets really conservative when, May and the offense get close. And, you would think it would be the other way around. They would be more conservative until they got close to the red zone. And then, they would, tend to tighten it up. But it didn't work that way. But, every week I come away more impressed with him. I think that, when you look at the big picture, everyone he's facing, and Matthew Stafford, Sean McVay, both had really, really good things to say about him. McVay said he looks like a stud and he's going to be successful for a long, long time. So those are all the things. And, when your peers are saying that, unscripted, right? I think that shows you just don't have Homer glasses on. I mean, this guy, the most impressive thing for me about Drake May this weekend was, due to limitations in the roster, which we've gone over a gazillion times, right?
We don't need to keep going.
Yeah, at wide receiver and at offensive line. A lot of times, the AVP, system is calling for shots down the field, but for one reason or another, they're not able to do that. So I think, what happened on Sunday was May tore them apart underneath. And the short game was supposed to be his weakness coming out, if you remember, right? Everyone was like, oh, yeah, he can throw the deep ball. He's athletic. He has,
Well, he had some inconsistencies with the shorter
sure.
passes, which is fair.
But overall in the short game, I thought he ate the Rams' lunch.
Oh yeah,
And
that wasn't an issue. That wasn't an issue right now. I mean, he's
mm.
taking some shots downfield, and I don't mean to interject and step over your point. I know where you're going with it, but like, I I um I think that he's taken some shots downfield, which is by design. It was by the AVP's kind of call and whatever, but and they haven't really connected. But I think that from the most part, I don't know what your thoughts on this, and I'll tie it back into what you were saying. But I think that for the most part, I feel like he's been pretty on the money from an accuracy standpoint down the field. It just hasn't been hauled in for whether it's a drop pass, whether it's a bad receiver play, whether it's a good defense by the cornerback or defensive back. I feel like he's put the ball on the fucking sorry, Miguel. sorry. I feel like he's put the ball on the money more often than not when they've taken those deep shots down the field. And to your point on the short game, he's been going ahead and he's not tripping over a nickel to pick up a dollar or whatever it is, or dollar to nickel, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think as far as him throwing across the middle of the field, I thought you saw in this game and really every game he's played in, he's not afraid to go over the middle, which is something that rookies are typically a little more, have a little more trepidation, a little more hesitancy, to throw across the middle of the field. He's making those throws and he's stepping into them. He's putting zip on it. He's putting touch on it. And it wasn't just this week. It's been the last couple of weeks. I think that is really big news. We're seeing progression. We're seeing step by step. It's not, we knew we weren't getting, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, so I apologize, but we knew that Jaden Daniels had 55 career starts coming out of ASU and LSU. And then he comes in and he lights it up. Now, he's cooled off a little bit because rookies are going to go through those peaks and valleys. Well, we knew that Drake May wasn't going to be at that. I mean, he was half of those career starts. He was going to take some time. We knew it was going to be late year 2, early year 3 before we really saw some ROI on May. And I think you're seeing it early. And I think that you're seeing it from former players such as Ryan Clark, who's an analyst for ESPN, John Gruden, who weirdly enough just joined Barstool, which is a little bizarre, but I mean he was singing Drake May's praises. I think you're seeing players and coaches and people around the league, Sean McVay, to your point, in the post game, talking about where this kid is at the look. It was a crap way to lose that game. It was a frustrating loss. At the same time, we should all be celebrating where Drake May is right now, because I think that you're seeing some juice behind it, and the poise and the maturity and the way he carries himself off the field, in interviews, in the pocket, when he's scrambling, how he goes through his progressions. Is he stepping into things? His touch, his short game, his middle of the field, his deep crossers. Yeah, he's taking a shot at booty every game down the sideline. I mean, there's so many things about his game that should make you really, really excited as a Patriots fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and my thing is, I mean, he's able to do these things now with let's face it, a limited roster.
Yeah.
So
he's bringing a knife to a gunfight more often than not.
Yeah. And, eventually, like the late game interception that happened on Sunday, as well as the one in Tennessee, these are going to be held up against him, because that's what happens when quarterbacks, get the experience, and, he's kind of getting a pass on these. But at the same time, I wonder if they were a little more aggressive on offense, especially when they get in the red zone, would they be having to do these things, week after week? So, that's a big thing. And, you mentioned Jaden Daniels. I think it was Taylor Kyles I saw some stuff on Twitter.
Shout out to Taylor. Love that kid.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he's great.
He's awesome.
And I think it was him. And if it wasn't, I apologize to the person who did put this out. But they said Jaden Daniels has 10 touchdowns and 294 pass attempts, which is pretty good, especially for a rookie. But he has some pretty decent weapons over there. Drake May has 9 touchdown passes and 182 attempts. So
let me ask you about. I'm gonna throw 3 different things at you, Steve. Okay, and you can take them in any order that you want, and then we'll have a discourse about it. I do want to table the Mayo thing because I think you and I have had a couple conversations off the air that I think we can circle back to maybe in the between the game segments. So we'll come back to Mayo. I want to ask you about a couple of different things. How do you feel about the offensive line the last couple weeks, including this game? How do you feel about AVP and his play calling, what he's done? And also, as far as a defense goes, do you put it more on the players or the play calling? Because, man, we saw a really big shift from the defense, from week to week. I know I asked you 2 offensive ones, 1 defensive one, so you can take it in any order you want. But let's pick apart those subjects here because I think there's some interesting conversations to be had with all of them.
Yeah. Okay. The play calling, I think, is getting better as that was the first question, right? Play calling.
Yeah, it was one of them. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. I think the play calling is improving every week, and you can see it on the field. They had almost 400 yards of offense. Was
that not the best offensive game they've had in like 3 years? I mean, it felt like it's been like several years since they've had a game where it looked like an actual offense.
I'd have to go back, but it was by far the best offensive game they've had this year.
Oh God, yeah, that's not even a not even a debate.
And you know what? And I know AVP comes under a lot of scrutiny. Now, I will say this: that one sequence in the fourth quarter where they just looked completely discombobulated. That's on him, because where it seemed like they were just wasting so much time, and and whatnot. Todd wants us to get to Mayo, but
we're gonna get to Mayo, Todd.
Yeah, but no, that one sequence was horrible. I thought, they wasted so much time and they didn't seem to have their act together, and everyone.
Do you think that's on Mayo? Do you think that's on Mayo, AVP, May, the whole?
Well, I think it's it has to be on the coaches because your offense
is too. Just so you know, we are in alignment on that. I do think it's on the coaches more than the players.
Yeah, because
I think that they've shown you. I think that they've shown you that they have more trust in May because they are opening up the playbook. I think, and they wouldn't do that. They would not do that if they didn't feel confident in May's ability to run the play callings. So to me, it's on the coaching staff, and in terms of like procedural stuff, that's on them. And yeah. I just think it was they just looked out of sorts.
Yeah, and again, they were functioning well all day long. I mean, the offense looked like a NFL offense, maybe not a Chiefs or a Bills offense, but it looked good. They were moving the ball all day long. And, then they had hit that sequence. And I think, the coaches, I don't know what happened. Maybe they got the play call wrong or the personnel wrong. It could be a bunch of things, but that still goes to the coaching staff. But, when I look at AVP now, I mean, you have to give him, and McCartney, whoever else, you have to give them high marks for, because everyone was saying Drake May needed time. He might have to sit this whole year. He's showing now that all of those things that they worked with him on, he's progressing, like you said, a lot faster than we thought he would. And, and I like the way the offense is going. Again, they're limited personnel wise, but I see the play calls and I know what they're trying to do. I mean, you can see it, especially when you watch the all 22 film, they're not there yet. But I don't think they should even consider. Now we'll have to see what the last, 6 games hold, 7 games, right? But I don't think they should even consider getting rid of him at this point.
What do you think about the offensive line play?
It's better, but it's still not good.
Would you say that it went from like a 4 to like a 6.5?
I think that's a fair assessment.
That's kind of where
they're
I'm
better.
at. Like it was piss freaking poor.
Oh,
the first
early
weeks.
in the season. I mean, how many times did we cringe thinking Jacoby Brissett wasn't going to get up?
I mean, I wanted May to start from week 1, but we all had our trepidation and our hesitancy about it for whatever reason. And I still hear people making it. And I'm not going to call it anyone individually because I understand. And again, if you and I had our druthers and we could have gone ahead and had the control of everything, we would have had May starting week 1, but we would have had a different personnel alignment for the offensive line. Yeah. And everyone I hear I keep hearing people banging their fists about May starting earlier and where he'd be. It's hard to really make that argument because, I mean, he's getting his ass kicked now.
Yeah. I mean, he's still getting hit a lot.
And some of that's on him, to be fair. Some of that is on him.
Yeah, because I think, when I look at a couple of the sacks, he's holding on to the ball, trying to make a play.
Yep.
And there's nothing there. But he's learning to throw it away when there's absolutely nothing there because, as he says, the coaches keep telling him, better to live another day than to make a mistake and have a turnover. That interception at the end of the game, I don't know. I mean, there was definitely a miscommunication because Pop Douglas looked like he was running toward the corner and May was expecting him to go to a post. And, the ball was out there and Douglas didn't turn around. I don't know, I didn't know the play call and we don't. So it's hard to say who was to blame for that. But I think that's one of those things that they'll learn from. But again, going back to AVP, I was critical of him early in the season, but, I think he's finding his feet. And, they had 400 yards of offense.
No, I know. I mean, look, there's some criticism for the offensive line.
Oh,
certainly criticism on Mayo, which we're going to circle back to. AVP, I think, is we all know the situation with AVP. Was he their first choice? No, not necessarily. Is he everybody's first choice? Probably not. But I do think he's actually calling a pretty good game the last couple of weeks. I don't really have a whole lot of problems with him right now. To me, he's down the list. He's not in the top 5 of my issues with the team right now. Would you agree with that?
And again, I look at the progression that Drake May's making every week, and he
has to get some credit for that.
Oh, absolutely, because he's the offensive coordinator, and they're meeting all the time, and they're finding what works and what doesn't, and things they need to work on. I mean, it's a process, and he's only played a handful of games, and he's gotten better.
6 games.
Yeah. He's only had 6 games. And, I mean, I look at his game right now and I was like, he's pretty far along for 6-game rookie.
If I'm not mistaken, they showed a graphic on CBS before the game started. Again, I could be wrong, so nobody hold me to this too much, but I'm pretty sure CBS showed a graphic that had him for 7 passing touchdowns and 200 or 220 rushing yards. In the first 5 games, it was like an NFL record for guys that, from a production standpoint. And again, I that's rough, but I feel pretty confident in it. But, to me, I mean, you should feel good about where May is at. To me, May, again, is he perfect? No. Are we going to be frustrated with picks or turnovers or whatever? Yes, absolutely. There was a couple things in this game the week before that we're just not happy with. And look, if this is year 3, it's a different conversation than right now. So, But right now, again, with AVP, not in the top 5 of your issues. I mean, you have other things that you have to figure out. Defensively, I want to get to. Mayo, I want to get to. I guess defensively and Covington are probably going to be a kind of a hand in hand. Before we do anything else, Steve, I want to get to my third thing that I had mentioned to you and talk about Covington. And look, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated because we talked about last week how they went to man and they were really successful. I mentioned the stat last week how their 3 highest percentage of man-to-man games they've all been wins against the Bengals, against the Jets, against who was the other win? Why am I blanking? What? I'm sorry.
The Bears.
And the Bears. Yes, thank you. And then you go to zone this week. Man, the tackles were sloppy. There were just guys running free. Really frustrating. I talk about Covington's game plan versus the defense and your kind of whole thought on that entire situation. You can go in any direction you want to.
Yeah, I mean, look, they put Christian Gonzalez on the outside, on the boundary.
And he wasn't shadowing.
No, he did on a few plays.
But yeah, for the majority, I mean,
but then after the first few series, the Rams, McVay said, "Well, let's move our guys to the other side of the field and see if they match," and they didn't. And that's when Stafford started to eat them up. Now
he was literally
when I rewatched the game, and the Rams use, and you and I talked about this yesterday offline, the Rams use a ton of motion. And they did not seem like they had a handle on that because, rewatching the game, I noticed where guys it looked like they should have been handing off to somebody else. They didn't, on several occasions. And you saw 2 guys go toward one guy get left open. Normally that was, Nakua, who he ate their lunch.
Oh my gosh.
And Cooper Kupp, to a degree, I mean, he had that one big pass.
He's not the player he was, but he's still capable of hurting you. But Nakua was the guy that, to me, Steve, and I don't know where you fall on this. I'm kind of curious on your thoughts on this. I didn't see I didn't really see a whole lot of adjustments being done. I don't understand. It just seemed like at one point it just felt like Nakua was the only guy the Patriots really had to worry about. And it didn't matter what they did. I mean, to Todd's point, who commented in, if you're listening on the podcast, he says beyond frustrating. I mean, you're frustrated watching the TV. It's like, dude, you just cover 17. What are we talking about? What are your thoughts on that?
And again, I mean, I know their emotion and all this, but I mean, it was obvious that the Rams were moving their guys to the other side away. And even Sean McVay admitted it after the game. And he was like, well, knowing Gonzalez, I'm paraphrasing a little bit here, but how good Gonzalez is, if we have the opportunity to go to the other side of the field, why not take it? And that proved to be, a huge difference in this because, they did not, they didn't adjust. And I was waiting for the adjustments. And I'm thinking, why is Gonzalez still staying out there when their 2 receivers, are kind of running all over the place and, you don't have them matched up with them. And look, I know it's a tough matchup with Sean McVay. He's one of the best, offensive coaches in the NFL.
One of the best coaches flat out, but yeah.
Yeah. But, and DeMarcus Covington he's a rookie defensive coordinator, but he got taken to school on Sunday.
Are you surprised? Are you surprised at all with Mayo and Covington's? Look, I don't want to be too harsh on them because they're in their rookie years in their roles. Okay. but I am a little surprised they seem to be either unwilling, unable, or have not at least presented the idea to make adjustments on the fly in game, given where they come from the Belichick tree, which was such a staple of his game. I mean, you talk about Bill Belichick on so many different levels, about how good he was. One of the best things I would say about Bill was his not only his ability to game plan, but his ability to make game plan adjustments mid game. Like, holy crap! Like, they threw a wrinkle. They threw a wrinkle, and we have to stop this tight end post route, and we weren't expecting this, and so we're gonna go ahead and switch up this. Like that was Bill's like MO. Like, we're going to take away what you guys do best. We're going to be ready for you guys. We're going to have our guys ready for situational football, and we're going to be able to make in-game adjustments. And with Mayo and Covington coming from that, again, I don't want to be too critical of them because I don't think that's necessarily fair. It's still early for them too. We talk about May and his rookie woes. You're going to have rookie woes with Mayo and Covington too, right?
Yeah, those guys. I mean, they're and I think it showed a little bit on Sunday.
But you understand where I'm coming from, though. Do you feel like that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's definitely fair. Because you look at it, your pass rush isn't getting home, so they started blitzing, and the problem with blitzing a quarterback like Stafford, who's been around so long, if you don't get home, then he's going to find the open spot and he's going to beat you. And that was happening time after time. And it seemed like they just kept, throwing the same thing up. They were blitzing, but not getting home. Then they zero blitzed them 4 times. And again, if you don't get home on those zero blitzes, bad things are going to happen. And
100%.
Stafford was 4 of 4 for 92 yards and 3 touchdowns against zero blitz.
I'm sure 99% of our audience understands what a zero blitz is, but do you want to give a quick little
Well, that's when you put everybody up on the line and you just empty your defense against the quarterback, and
there's no safety help.
No safety help, and you're
usually bringing at least 6, and then covering 5 essentially. Sorry to cut you off, but that's basically what you're.
Yeah, and then it's strictly man coverage right at the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you're sending the house, and we get that, but if you don't get home, your guys have to play really, really tight coverage. And
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say I want to take a break after this next little conversation here, but I think the thing that pissed me off the most about the game was the fact that they, to your point, Stafford was just picking them apart, and they're playing so much zone, and they seldomly went to man, and they had so much success the week before. And to Todd's point, I appreciate your comments, Todd. They were playing it so safe, and at some point you feel like you have to spin the dial a little bit. Like, Stafford's been in the league for a long time. This isn't friggin' Caleb Williams, who you can kind of go through and throw a couple different things at him and try some different looks. Stafford's going to diagnose everything 9 out of 10 times before the play snapped.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you think that was? I don't really get it.
Well, it was funny because last night I read something that Evan Lazar wrote, and he said that the Patriots played a lot more man coverage than we thought. I want to put it. Yeah, he said 59.3% man coverage.
That's surprising to me because it didn't feel like that.
It did not. And I was surprised to see that as well, because, we know Evan knows his stuff. But yeah, it did not seem like they were 59, almost 60% man coverage. But I just didn't like the matchups. That was the big thing. I mean, why wasn't Gonzalez shadowing, um, Nakua? I don't understand that part of it. The 169-yard touchdown, it was zero blitz. Stafford recognized what was coming. And, Jonathan Jones, who had a pretty awful game on Sunday, he slipped. He slipped right out of the break, and that was all she wrote. That was an easy touchdown.
Yeah. All right, let's step aside here for podcast purposes. We come back. Steve and I have a couple other conversations we want to talk about before we preview the upcoming game versus the Miami Dolphins. We'll be back right here on Patriots 4th and 2. All right, we're back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Steve Balestrieri, Derek Havens. Please do subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, Patriots 4th and 2. Also, be sure to like us or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Wherever you listen to podcasts, like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. I want to give a shout out to people who have been tweeting at us. Todd commenting in. I appreciate that as always. We always love the interaction. Want to give a shout out to Russ Goldman and Ian Logue as always. Steve, where do you want to go next? Because we have a couple different conversations. I feel like we should have the Mayo conversation because he's been getting a lot of heat. And I do feel like some of it's deserved, and I do feel like some of it's a little over the top. What else is new for Boston sports media? But look, I want to preface what I'm going to say with this, and I mentioned this a couple minutes ago. I do think that people need to take a step back and realize that Mayo's just beginning his head coaching career as well, so there's going to be a learning curve. Okay, I do think that there's been some issues with him putting his foot in his mouth earlier on in the year. Obviously, you're coming off the heels of Bill Belichick when, you're coming off, if not the best coach, one of the best coaches in sporting history, So it's going to be impossible shoes to fill. At the same time, I do feel like there has been some clapback for whether it's, what he says or how he goes about things. Give me your thoughts on Gerard Mayo right now from your perspective.
Well, again, I mean, I think they're far too conservative offensively. I think the way you want to develop your quarterback is, if he shows he's not able to handle, more rope, then you tighten it up. But, as we said earlier, I mean, Drake May seems to be progressing at a much faster rate than any of us thought. And when they get down close, in the red zone or even in, around the 10-yard line, don't just run pass, because that, you're hampering your offense to score points. And I don't like some of the very, very conservative situation, like on the 4th and 2 play. And, and I've heard arguments on both sides. Yes, it's a 2-score game. You kick a field goal and it's back to a 1-score game. I get that. But when your defense is showing they can't stop the Rams, then 3 points it's not going to make it. You're going to have to start scoring touchdowns. And that's where I have I find a lot of fault with him. And I understand, how things, you want to cut it to a 1-score game. But at the same time, if when you get down, inside the red zone, if you're scoring more touchdowns, then maybe your quarterback isn't in that situation with, under 2 minutes to go where he has to go the length of the field with no timeouts or one timeout, And those are the things. And they don't make adjustments. You and I have already talked about that.
Yep.
They don't make adjustments. And he's a guy that grew up as a player playing for Bill. The players called him Little Bill because, he
I mean, that
he
goes
was
back to Teddy Bruschi, basically.
yeah, yeah, because he was such a disciple of everything Bill preached, and you know, and then he coached under him for 5 years, and he knows better than anybody. Bill's That's the biggest thing with him, in-game adjustments. I mean, they could see if something was working or the other team made a counter move. And how many times did we see that? It's too many to count, where Bill would gather the whole defense around him on the sideline, and he'd start preaching about, "Hey, this is what we got to do." Mayo knows that he's not a bad coach. He's because he has that smarts. He just needs to begin, I believe, to start using that authority. He says he's kind of like the overseer, the chairman of the board, whatever you want to call him, right? And he lets guys delegate. But DeMarcus Covington is a rookie coordinator as well. Sometimes as the head coach, you have to step in. That's part of being the head coach and a leader.
Yep.
So, anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Do you think that Mayo needs to be more assertive in certain situations? Well, maybe assertive is not the right word. I guess I'll use the word aggressive. I feel like they're very passive at times, and I feel like they're, in some ways, it kind of comes from the school of Bill in terms of like kind of letting the other team wanting to beat themselves.
Yep.
But they're not a very good team. We know that. We know that they're already going to be, from a talent perspective, probably coming up short compared to who they're playing against. Okay, that's not a secret. That's not a diss. This is just the expectation, the reality of the situation. So it's like, do you think that you agree with having them kind of play that way and seeing if they can trip other teams up and just letting them kind of trip all over themselves? Or do you think it's a thing where they need to be more aggressive because it's like, hey, you're playing with house money here. Just go for it.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and again, I mean, that goes back to Bill, because he would wait a team out because they would always make the mistake.
Yeah,
right?
and they also had the best quarterback in NFL history.
They had loaded teams for years. I mean, the Patriots were always one of the best teams in the league for 18 years, right? Maybe the last 2 years of Brady's career there, they didn't have loaded teams there. But when you have Brady and you have the veteran presence and the mix, you can wait teams out. But they don't have the talent anymore to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and again, you're coming into the game, you're 3-7. I mean, be a little more aggressive. Make the other team react to you, because you're not making the playoffs, So I just think he's too conservative. And again, I mentioned a name to you offline that I won't, because a lot of people might get upset with that. But a lot of this reminds me of that one person.
Well, let's say this too. Like, I think that there's something to be said about playing smart and to kind of let things come to you and try to put your position or your opponent in a position where they make a mistake and you capitalize on it. But I think positively, I think the coaching staff, I want to praise them for this. I do think they've handled May well. I do think that he's progressed well. But I also think that they are kind of shooting themselves in the foot in other standpoints too. And they're almost like fighting with one hand tied behind their back, because it's like they're scared to pull out all these punches. But it's like you have to be a little bit more aggressive. It's like, hey, if we go out because you've had May throw the ball 40 times and you took a couple shots down the field and he throws 2 picks and that cost you the game, well, then you should still be able to lay your head on the pillow at night and say, well, at least we took a chance. Right now, it just seems like you have May here and you seem to be doing things the right way, but you also are almost not doing your team the full service that they need to do to be more aggressive and to take those shots.
Right. If you fail trying to win, I can live with that.
Can we all as Patriots fans live with that? Like if we say, wow, they went for it, May didn't make the play, someone didn't make a catch, a couple of missed blocks, whatever it was, at least we can say they tried to do it. At this point, it's just kind of like, guys, just
They're
go out and
trying
just
not to lose.
swing. And what happens when you try not to lose, Steve?
You lose.
Yes. So
that's why it's like, when you're 3-7, hey, go for it, and you can surprise people. I thought they should have went for that on 4th and 2, and I've seen that a couple of times, too many times this year, where they get down there and it's like, you got to go for it. And then when you and I talked yesterday, I brought up the Buffalo game. Buffalo was up by 2, but then they had a 4th and 2 on a 17-yard line. If they kick a field goal with a minute or 2 to go, then Kansas City could still win the game with a touchdown. Instead,
they put it in their best
ball
players'
in Josh Allen's hands, and guess what happened?
Yep.
There wasn't going to be no comeback because they were up by 2 scores.
I know Patriots fans don't want to hear this, and I understand, but man, it's so easy to root for that kid.
I think he's fantastic.
He's so awesome. He's so awesome to watch. I mean,
I don't care that he plays for Buffalo. He is an awesome football player.
Oh, he's terrific. That was cool. That was really cool. And look, I'm not saying that Drake should be in Josh Allen's position. I'm not saying that. Okay, I'm not. And you and I did disagree about this a little bit. And just again, peek behind the curtain for everyone. And look, I tweeted this out at the time. I thought it would be dumb for them not to go ahead and kick the field goal and make it a 1-score game. But I had a lot of people push back on me, and maybe it makes me hypocritical. I'm not saying that I haven't been in the past, okay? But I did think that the smart move was to kick the field goal, but I can see the argument against it. Like, put the pressure on them. Go for it. See what happens. they're gonna have bad field position if you don't get it anyway. So
they were on the 2-yard line,
right? So you could talk me in, one way or the other. But anyway, we'll come back to Mayo at another time. Again, we're just kind of navigating the waters like everybody else is. All right, but let's get into the Dolphins, Steve. You want to get into Barmore, Christian Barmore? Yeah. So give me your thoughts on Barmore's return. It was good. It was great seeing him back on the field, man.
Oh my God, awesome. Yeah. He only played a handful of snaps. Actually, he played about 18, I think they said after the game.
Which was but yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, which was a lot more than I thought. And he still has a ways to go football wise to get back to where he was. But man, we thought he was definitely done for the season. It was great to hear that he was activated back on the active roster. And then, he played. He made a couple of tackles. We know he still has a ways to go, but having him back is really going to help the defense in a couple of different ways. The run defense will obviously get better because, they've had trouble in the middle of the field. And Barmore and Devon Godchild will definitely help solve some of those issues. The other is now they're going to be able to have pressure up the middle from their defensive line, which they've missed this year. A couple of guys have stepped up, Aquale, Roy, Farms. Those guys have done a good job, but let's face it, they're not Christian Barmore.
No, they're not.
So,
well, either way, happy to have him back. It's exciting. I thought Duggar came back too. I thought he had a really rough game, a little rusty. I thought the tackling was really bad. I don't know if I mentioned that already, but I was really disappointed in the tackling. That's usually something that they're really pretty sound at and have been, but I just thought this week was not clean from that standpoint. But from the Dolphins standpoint, Steve, let's give initial thoughts on the Dolphins game. Obviously the Dolphins are on their own slide. They're having some up and down stuff. Really, the division is really weird. The Bills are kind of what they are. They're one of the best teams in the league, one of the best teams in the conference. The Jets fired Joe Douglas today. We're recording this Tuesday, the 19th.
That's long overdue.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, personnel, I mean, I think he's done a decent job drafting, but they haven't done a very good job of building the team and constructing it. It's multi-layered, they put all their eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket, and it's totally, having some holes in there. But Douglas is gone, so that'll be interesting to see how they kind of reshuffle that whole thing. But you get to the Dolphins now, and man, there's so many different ways you could go in this conversation. To me, Steve, the first thing I want to talk about is, for one, something I just criticized for the Patriots for tackling. I think that's going to be a huge thing this week, because you can't let the Dolphins skill players escape these initial tackles, because they have too much speed. They're going to hurt you for big gashes. And then obviously, you can debate where you think Mike McDaniel is as a head coach, but I think from an offensive scheme perspective, he really does put players in good position usually, and they can pretty much strike at any time. So, what are your thoughts on them as a whole? Going into this game. I mean, look, I know I'm not breaking any news here. The Patriots are probably not making the playoffs, but it's still a big game if they want to go ahead and at least be in the conversation towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and looking at the Dolphins game, again, they use a ton of motion to get their skill position guys, going full speed at the snap and getting them free releases. And the Patriots didn't do a good job last week.
No.
Of handling, the Rams motion stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react to that, and if they can right the ship on that this week. When it comes to the Dolphins skill position guys, I mean, in the past, what have they done? They've doubled up, Tyreek Hill, and and put maybe their best guy on Waddle, or vice versa. It's one of those things that they've done pretty good against. I mean, the Dolphins have had games where they absolutely shredded them, but on the whole, they've done a pretty good job against Hill and Waddle. But they always seem to save their worst play of the season. I think it goes every year in Miami. It always seems that way, doesn't it? So we'll see what this game brings. But the Dolphins' defense isn't. I don't think it's that great this year. There'll be opportunities there for Drake May. Now, the pass protection will have to hold up, because they can get after the quarterback. And I think in the last game, I want to say the pass protection was pretty bad when the Dolphins came to Foxborough. We would have to check back on that one. But, when looking at Miami, I mean, they still have a shot at making the postseason now that Tua's back. I think, the main thing with him, they have to try to keep him inside the pocket and beat them from there, and, slow down the running game, because they have some speed out there on the field.
Yeah, I mean, when they played last, it was October 6th, so about 6 weeks ago. Dolphins won 15-10, that was Tyler Huntley playing in that game. A little different. Now you have Tua back in. I really do kind of get back to wanting the Patriots to have I just think I have one of the keys. I don't want to spoil one of my keys with what I want to say, but I do think it comes down to, when they play solid in the trenches, the game is either very close or they win. And when they get blown out in the trenches, they pretty much have lost every single game this week. So let's get into it, Steve. Dolphins offense in the running game versus the Patriots defense. Who do you like and why?
I think the Patriots are going to do a pretty good job this week getting Barmore back. Hopefully they'll get a couple of their other guys back. They were missing some pretty decent players. Dietrich Wise was out. Mapu was out.
Yep.
Duggar
was coming back. Barmore was coming back.
Yeah, Duggar he was definitely rusty. No, I take it back. they were only sacked twice in that first game, but they
Yep.
did have 9 quarterback hits.
Yep.
So, but again, I mean, I think the Patriots, they've been trending better in the running game in the past couple of weeks. I know they gave up like 107 yards. They were actually, the Rams were averaging about 5 yards a carry for their running backs on Sunday. But I think part of that had to do with they were just shredding them with the pass, and then it just opened things up to where, they were catching them trying to blitz or stunt, with the pass rush there. So I think the Patriots going to get a slight advantage here.
I'm going to go with the Dolphins. I would feel better if I felt like the team fundamentally from a tackling standpoint would be better, but I'm a little worried about, you really can't miss tackles against A-Chain or against Mostert. I mean, they're just too quick. They can you can go from a 1 or 2 yard gain to a 60-yard gain real quick if you don't wrap up. So I think that's going to be key for them this week. In the passing game, Steve, you're expecting Tua to be here, and Waddle got involved early last week in the game. You had Tyreek Hill, who has a torn ligament in his wrist, but it really hasn't slowed him down. They've been able to go ahead and kind of spread it around. McDaniel loves to get his guys in space. I do think that Gonzalez has been solid. Marcus Jones, I think, has been better defensively as late in coverage. John Jones, they're moving kind of all over. Where do you feel like, if at all, the Patriots have an advantage in this aspect, or do you give it to the Dolphins?
I think the Dolphins have the advantage here because Tua's back. And, again, a lot of their big pass plays come behind the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
They're really, really good at disguising things and then throwing a screen or a 2-yard pass. Sometimes it's behind the line, and they get the blockers out front. And, you watch that, 2-yard behind the line of scrimmage flip turn into a 16, 17-yard gain. And, those are the things they have to be aware of. And they do it a lot with the backs as well. I mean, Hill does it a lot, and the backs do it a lot too. Those are the things that you have to be on the lookout for. I think, in this game, I know Jonathan Jones in the past has covered Hill, but I think they need to double him.
If you double Hill, would you put Gonzalez
on Waddle?
On Waddle, and then okay,
right. Yeah, because I would put John Jones underneath, have safety help over the top. I put Gonzalez on Waddle, and if you lose that way, you at least you
can sleep better at night.
Yeah, because you gave it your best shot, and maybe as the game progresses, you might switch that up and move Gonzalez over to Hill, depending on what the situation looks like. So I think they have two ways that they could combat that. But again, I think in this game, it's going to be won or lost. Patriots off the ball linebackers have to be better in coverage. I think that's such a big thing in this game.
If flipping sides of the ball to the Patriots offense in the running game versus the Dolphins defensively, who do you feel like has that advantage?
I'm going to give a slight advantage to Miami in this one because the Patriots are getting better, with the run blocking. I think the past few weeks, I think Ramondre, he had 74 yards against the Bears. He had 73 against the Rams, and that's a good number. It shows that you're getting those sticks, moving. I think they need to get Gibson more involved in both the running and passing game.
Have you been surprised that he hasn't been involved in the the pass catching aspect?
I mentioned that in the column I wrote yesterday. I've been really surprised because I thought he was going to have a huge year here, with the, coming out of the backfield, in the passing game, and it hasn't materialized. I think they need to get him more involved, especially in the passing game.
It seems like this needs to be one of those weeks, Steve, where they do a lot of death by a thousand paper cuts, a lot of quick passes, just kind of matriculate the ball up and down the field and keep that offense on the sideline, keep that defense kind of gassed, and kind of go through that whole thing. In the passing game, Steve, who do you like from the Patriots offense to the Dolphins defense?
Well, I think Drake May is going to be successful again this week. I do. I mean, the Patriots don't have, those dynamic wide receivers that are going to keep Miami's coaches up at night. But I think Kendrick Bourne is starting to round into shape. I thought he had a really good game on Sunday.
Yep.
And I think it goes through Hunter Henry again. I mean, we say this every week, but he's their most consistent, most reliable guy. And I think, if you're going to attack Miami, attack them in the middle of the field and down the seams. And I think guys like Henry, Bourne, and Douglas have to factor huge in this game.
I think Henry's been pretty solid. I mean, throughout the year. I mean, it obviously May has taken an affinity to him a little bit. We knew about his ability to throw over the middle of the field. I think Cooper and him have both been little kind of like safety blankets, for lack of a better term, for him. So that's been good. I do give May a little bit of an edge because I'm happy with his progression to this point. But I do think that you have some weapons in the secondary, a lot of veteran guys, a lot of playmakers. It's one of those situations where I could see. I know this is sitting on both sides of the fence, and I don't want to do this, but it's one of those things where May can take some gambles and he can make you pay for it. And those guys want to take chances, but they also could pick your pocket a little bit too and turn those things into turnovers. So
I think you'll see Miami playing a lot of zone this week.
Yeah, I think they're going to play it safe because I think that it's, going back to something that we were talking about with the Patriots earlier, if you're Miami, you're saying, hey, New England's going to have to sell out. So let's see what they do, and let's try to make sure that we don't beat ourselves in order to go ahead and do it that way. Let's go to 3 keys, Steve. 3 keys to victory for the Patriots. I'll let you kick it off. What are your 3 keys for the Patriots winning this weekend?
Well, again, I think you need to attack the middle and the seams on the defense. You said yourself they have really good secondary play overall, but I think their cornerbacks are quite good. But I think those middle of the field, those quick cut in slants and whatnot. Hunter Henry, Bourne, Pop Douglas. I think that's where you have to go offensively. And, when you get those opportunities, you can't miss them. I mean, this is going to be another one of those games where, you're probably going to be fighting the scoreboard all game long because we know Miami's offense now is going to be better now that Tua's back. And they'll only get better as the weeks go along. So that's a big thing there. And defensively, key number 2, I think you have to keep Tua in the pocket, and you have to disrupt their timing. I mean, it sounds simple enough, but it's easier said than done.
Especially with his scheme, though, too, with McDaniel's scheme, like
they get the ball out in less than 2 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they have a very designed philosophy and they want to attack you in a certain way. And to your point, if they can insert themselves into disrupting that timing, the whole thing is going to be thrown into a funk, and that's when you're going to have opportunities to make a play.
Yeah. And because they get the ball out quick, they don't mess around with it. And so, you have to disrupt the timing and throw, Tua and his receivers off. And that's when you have a shot. I mean, my 3rd key is, again, it's red zone. You have to score in the red zone, not put field goals. You have to score touchdowns. I mean, especially going down to Miami this week has always been a tough place for them since I was a youngster. They have never done well in Miami, and traditionally they have not. Even during the Brady years, playing in Miami was always a struggle for them. with very few exceptions. So that's my third key is, you have to cash in the red zone.
All good points. I'll start off with my first key, which I've already kind of alluded to over the last couple minutes or so. Tackling. I think tackling is huge this
Oh, yeah.
week. You can't go ahead and miss tackles and let these guys run free. They're too quick, too explosive. You need to go ahead and limit those things as much as possible. My second thing, you actually mentioned it as well, and I totally agree. I think keeping Tua in the pocket's huge. I'm not really worried about him scrambling a ton, but when you extend plays and you buy time, it just makes it so hard for your defense to go ahead and adjust and coverage these guys down the field. And again, big chunk plays. And the third thing for me is I feel like the Patriots have done a really poor job at times this year when they've lost, which unfortunately has been more than they've won, because they are hurting themselves with penalties and turnovers and putting themselves behind the sticks. They're not the same team that it was the last year or two, where if they have a delay a game or a illegal shift or whatever, false start, whatever it is, where they're just totally DOA. But they can't be in a situation where they're putting themselves, against the numbers and having to overcome that plus the opponent. They're just not talented and skilled enough to do that. They're not in that situation right now. So those three things to me, Steve, are paramount to having them come away with a victory this week. I'd love to go ahead and give a couple thoughts on a few different games this week, but we are kind of up against it. So let's get right into our prediction for this week's game. Who do you think is going to win and why?
I think Miami's going to win because, again, the Patriots have never traditionally played their best football down there. I think that defensively they're pretty banged up right now, and it kind of showed a little bit on Sunday. They were missing some of their, I think getting Mapu back, Taki, Dietrich Wise, that would help with the with the defense. Because they really need some help, especially in the middle of the field. I worry about the linebackers in coverage this week. Um, Offensively, I think they're going to do okay. I'm just not sure they'll be able to keep up.
Yep.
And that's the big thing with me. I mean, I just don't think they have the talent other than their quarterback to keep up with Miami's offense. I think they're going to be chasing the scoreboard all day. That's why I think Miami will probably play a little more zone this week, so Drake May isn't getting to the point where he's changing the outlook on the game with his feet. I think Miami is probably going to win this one. I'd say 24-20.
Okay. So I do think that I have a hard time envisioning the Patriots winning this game if they let Miami dictate everything. I think that either Miami's going to have to make some mistakes or the Patriots are going to have to steal a couple things or make some big plays. I don't think Miami's a great team, and I think they have their own faults. But right now, the Patriots are still beating themselves in a couple different areas. And I think it's really hard to not only overcome, I would say, a superior roster with also inflicting, kind of inflicting your own damage, basically. I mean, there's too many issues, even pre-snap, that they're still having issues with when we're more than halfway through the year at this point. So to me, that's a big concern. I have the Patriots losing this game, unfortunately. I have them losing, I'll say Miami 23, Patriots 16. But I think I had a similar score last week. I just don't see the Patriots just playing like if the Patriots and Dolphins play a clean game, I have a hard time picturing them coming away with a victory without them kind of stealing a couple things here. And they need to clean up some things on their own end in order to go ahead and overcome that. Any final thoughts, Steve, as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things for me is they just can't seem to generate any kind of turnovers.
Right.
I mean, that's when your defense is struggling and they're banged up. boy, a couple of turnovers here and there can, turn the outlook around big time, and they haven't been able to do that. And if there's a week where they can do that, boy, this would be the week, down in Miami, because it's going to be tough.
My final thought is I just want to see them kind of progress with May. I'm happy with AVP's, I guess, opening up the playbook, so to speak, and giving him a little bit more wiggle room, because I think that you can go ahead and utilize his skill set and his athletic ability and make some kind of splash plays happen. But I do think that the fundamentals are killing them right now. So that's what I want to see cleaned up this week. Anyway, for Steve Balestrieri, I'm Derek Havens. I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Please do subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Keep us high in the podcast rankings so other Patriots fans can find us. I want to give us a shout out to Russ Goldman and Ian Logue, and we will see you